Hello, welcome to Miss Clark Reads to You. We're picking up in chapter 10 of Deathwatch by Rob White. I'm on page 120. I've started some notes and I'm going to finish up my notes, give my chapter a name, and identify the mood and tone. Wherever Maddock would be in sight, he would be out of range of the slingshot. So Ben knows that even though he can shoot that thing 20 feet, that there's so much space between Ben, even if he stood here and aimed at Maddock, there's so much space between that top of that ledge and where Maddock would be climbing up the butte. At those same places, Ben would be an easy target for the gun. A gun is, you can't compete. You got a slingshot, you got a gun. So Ben has to be really strategic here because Maddock still has access to that gun. He realized slowly and bitterly that he could not stop Maddock from climbing. He could not even harass him and slow him down. Ben looked across at the ledge 20 feet above him. He studied it for a moment and then slowly looked back along his own ledge and on into the deep shadows of the tunnel. From the wide ledge toward which he was climbing, Maddock could stand or even sit comfortably, his elbows wedged down against the legs for firm support. So Ben realizes that as soon as Maddock gets to this ledge, so I'll draw this out a little bit, the way this ledge is, Maddock can lean down and aim the gun and shoot Ben inside the tunnel. Okay? So that's the strategy. Ben realizes Maddock has more advantages. There was no place to hide. Ben went back along the ledge into the tunnel to where the slingshot lay beside the little pile of stones he had gathered. The sound of the hammer seemed to beat against him, and he sat beside the slingshot and idly fitted it into his hand. Ben was listening so intently to the hammer that it was a long time before he realized he had also been hearing the sound above him. It was a hollow, rattling, irritating noise. He ran up to the mouth of the tunnel and he looked up. The helicopter was like transparent gold floating in the sky, coming nearer and nearer. He could not make out the markings on it, but he was sure that it was the game and fish chopper on a routine patrol. It was the most beautiful thing Ben had ever seen in his life. And I love that hyperbole at the end, because even if there were more beautiful things in nature, in life that Ben had seen, in this moment, the helicopter symbolizes Ben possibly getting rescued. So I'm going to name this chapter Maddock's Advantages, because Ben realizes that even though he's safe right now, he's foolish to think he's safe forever. And the mood of this is, it's interesting because there's a ledge here. I'm going to say on the edge. And the tone is one of planning. It's one of figuring out. It's one of, I got to get a word. I will think of that tone as we go into chapter 11. Strategy. Strategic contemplation. Ben couldn't be sure, but when the chopper went in sharp skid and floated gently to the ground not 100 feet from the Jeep, he would have bet money that Denny O'Neill was flying it. Ben felt so good he was jumping up and down on the ledge, yawing his lungs out as the dust of the chopper's landing blew away, and he saw a man get out of it and run, stooped out from under the rotors. He had expected to see a game warden and hoped it would be the supervisor, Les Stanton, but the man was in civilian clothes. Ben calmed down, saving his breath and waiting for the chopper blades to stop. But as he waited, he realized that although the engine had slowed and the blades were just lazily turning, it hadn't stopped. It wasn't going to stop. Not if Denny O'Neil were flying it. Denny had told Ben once, Ben, trouble with you is you think engines want to run. Well, I got news for you. They don't. Anytime they can get away with not running, believe me, they'll do it. And engines are smart and they're mean. When everything's going good up in the chopper and you can see forever, that engine will run, but you get in trouble in bad weather and get down in a gorge you gotta fly out of, and that engine will quit. Engines don't like people, and you better believe it. Out there on the desert, Denny had told him, in that chopper, I know that engine's just waiting for me to get myself in a bind so it can quit. Well, I don't let it. I start that booger up in the morning, and I don't let it quit until I'm home again. Ben went on to the ledge of the cliff. He cupped his hands around his mouth and he yelled, "Hey!" as loudly as he could. And he kept on yelling and moving and jumping and swaying and waving his arms. Denny O'Neil didn't get out of the chopper. The other man walked over to the Maddock, who was now beside the Jeep, and Ben watched them as they talked. So Denny O'Neil is clearly the pilot, and there's this other man who gets out and walks over to Maddock. They probably had to yell at each other to be heard over the sound of the engine. The man looked like Les Stanton, but he had on a purple shirt outside his yellow trousers, and he wasn't wearing a hat. When Ben saw the man's shoes, he knew it wasn't Les. Les would be caught dead in the desert in a pair of low-cut white shoes. Still trying to attract their attention, Ben could feel something dying inside him. This was where Maddock would be good. His lies would be smooth and logical and convincing. The man shook hands with Maddock and went back to the chopper, still yelling, "Hey!" And knowing that it was useless, Ben watched the chopper swirl up and emerge from its cloud of dust and go away. It disappeared so fast, leaving only the fading sound of Denny's always running engine to taunt him for a moment longer. Oh, Ben walked slowly into the tunnel and stood at one of the biggest of the water-worn holes looking down. Maddock was walking briskly back toward the butte. Ben watched him until he was out of sight under the overhang. For a long time he just stood there defeated, listening to the hammer, hoping the chopper would come back, but knowing that it would not. So, hope, when Ben sees Chopper, then by page, what page is that? That is page 124 of chapter 11. Hope is lost. Then finally he wandered out of the tunnel, out onto the ledge and along it to the end. There he leaned out as far as he could, keeping one hand firmly on the cliff face, and he looked down. Whatever Maddock did, he did well. He was braced now, the rope around his waist, about 15 feet above the ground, his boots firmly planted in the footholds he had chopped out, the rope secured around a tent peg driven into the crack in the rock. So you've got him now, Maddock. He's up here, okay? He is making his stairway, okay? He's climbing. He's got the rope around his belly, and it's tied into a tent peg, okay? So, and there's 15 feet that he's made it up so far, okay? So he's getting up there to where Ben is in that tunnel. This is a great line too. Whatever Maddock did, he did well. He may never have before climbed the face of a mountain or a rock. And Ben is like, man, this guy can do everything well. Even using a tent peg and getting holes into the butte, the stone, to get up to me. He was chopping a new handhold, and the hammerhead glinting in the sunlight. And I love that Ben is like, even the hammer is his friend. It's glinting, it's gleaming in the sunlight, like, whatever you need, Maddock, whatever you need. It would take Maddock the rest of the day to chop his way up to the first ledge. From there, the rest was just to stroll up the butte, no problem. Great word, stroll, like a leisurely walk. Maddock wouldn't come up there at night. He was cautious to do that. He would finish cutting his little holes in the rock and finish driving his spikes where he needed them. And then, when all was ready, he would wait out the night and come in the morning. Returning to the tunnel, Ben looked out through its stone mouth, which seemed to frame a picture and make it more vivid. The far mountains were masses of purple, rugged and alive-looking. These were not the old, worn, tree-covered mountains he had seen in other places. These were tough young mountains, their peaks sharp and strong against the deep blue of the sky, and their ridges full of vigor. And the desert itself was not a bleak and arid place, it seemed, but it was a place full of life, a place where a plant might lie dormant for years, and then, with the first drops of rain, spring to full life and produce its flowers, cast its seed and die, all in 24 hours. The hammer had stopped. It was insulting. The thought of being killed here in the desert where he had always lived by this man from the city was insulting and outrageous. Ben got to his feet slowly, and he walked down to the narrow end of the tunnel. As he did so, he made his decision. So that's page 125, and I think the strongest line for me here is how Ben realizes even he can study, as we see, he's such a good geologist. He can study the mountains, and he knows what mountains are old, and he knows what mountains are new, and he knows this desert so well, and he tells himself, for all I know, it can't change the fact that this man can kill me in a second, and I'm insulted by this. This is outrageous to me. I've got to think. I've got to make a decision. I've got to pull that chain closer. We come back to that symbolism. So I'm going to stop reading there on page 125. When we come back, I'll have the board set up for the notes for chapter 11. And I look forward to seeing you again and reading to you again. Have a nice day.